This week on the BackTable podcast.
I look at the sign, I'm like, okay, this is my chance to have a hard body. So I walk in and and I'm like, so what is this? This is yoga. I'm like, it says get hard. Yeah, your body will be very, fit if you do it. Like, okay, let me try. So I go to the class and she's like, okay, go in child pose. I go in child pose and she cranks up the heat to 104 degrees. And at that time, I realized, I'm like, okay, this is like really literally hot yoga.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the BackTable podcast, your source for all things urology. You can find all previous episodes of our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and at BackTable.com. This is Aditya Bagrodia as your host this week, and I'm very excited to introduce our guest today, Dharam Kaushik from Houston Methodist Hospital. How are you doing, Dharam?
I'm doing great, Aditya. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast.
You know, the pleasure's all mine. I've really been inspired as I've had the good fortune of learning what you've been up to in San Antonio when you were previously there. I'm sure this will continue in Houston and beyond, no question about it. And, as I was kind of preparing for this podcast, it's simple enough to say that yoga has been such an instrumental part of your life. I'll share a little story. So when I was getting married, my wife is also Indian. We were having a traditional Indian Hindu ceremony, and I could not sit crisscross applesauce on the ground, which is kind of a standard part of our affair. And, sure enough, they had to bring these like little decorative stools for me to sit on. So it started becoming, pretty abundantly clear to me that I had some serious flexibility issues that, if it was like playing soccer or running, I could sort it out for a day or two. But this can be like a real lifelong thing, particularly as surgeons. Any kind of comments on that, Dharam?
I agree, Aditya. Flexibility is not emphasized much, especially in our culture. At the same time, we strive to be flexible, doing other workout. But I think yoga was kind of designed to be flexible. It's actually the whole purpose of yoga was you can sit down in the crisscross applesauce position so you can meditate and connect with yourself.
I love that. And we'll dig into the kind of philosophical components of yoga and breathwork here in a bit, but I think we should start at the beginning. So you're a urologic oncologist. I'm a urologic oncologist. We're kind of hurtling through space, trying to take good care of patients, stay up to date, get a research program going. And, year one, it's kind of like just googly eyes, big cases, things are going well. The highs are highs, the lows are kind of catastrophic. And then clearly at some point in your career, in your life, something clicked or something came to be within you that said, I need to maybe prioritize other aspects of my professional life. Can you talk a little bit about that process?
Yeah, of course. Everything changed with the pandemic. It gave us time to reflect on meaningfulness in our life, what is important in our life. I almost had an epiphany where I realized that I was maybe hurting myself by working too hard and putting a lot of stress on my physical and mental aspect. And that kind of led me to explore what can I do within my sphere of influence to help myself. And I explored different options, and yoga was one of the options which came up. And I grew up in India, Aditya, and I was skeptical about yoga. As a kid, I ran away from yoga. My parents wanted me to do yoga and learn yoga, but I thought it was very strange and weird, and I didn't want to be a contortionist as a kid. So I actually never gave any importance. It's ironic that I actually learned yoga in San Antonio during pandemic. That changed the way I looked at meaningfulness in my life.
Yeah, I think in some form or fashion, all of us had to take a good long look in the mirror and kind of recalibrate. And the pandemic is an obvious one. I think there's life events, children, marriage, divorces, death of a loved one that kind of do these things. But I suspect, and I think certainly it's acknowledged, that burnout, sense of incomplete well-being, physical deterioration, these are insidious processes. And someday, this kind of lingering, nagging thought in the back of your mind reaches a critical mass where you do something, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to overcome that activation energy to just be like, man, today was another like okay day, not like, man, today was amazing and I feel like awesome, or like today was so bad that I think I'm going to go home and kill myself, right? These are like extremes.
And we actually, surgeons are extremely burned out. If you look at the urology literature, we have 70 to 80% burnout rate. We were ranked in 2020 in Medscape, ranked the top specialty for burnout. We do it to ourselves by physical distress and mental distress. And that results in kind of emotional exhaustion, what you were talking, Aditya, that you just have nothing to give. We are supposed to be compassionate and giving and loving, but if your tank of compassion is empty, there is no amount of motivation which can lead you to become a better doctor. You cannot give compassion to others if you don't have compassion. That's why it was important for me to reflect, pause, and say, you know what? I need to fix this within myself and whatever I could do. And then I benefited so much from doing yoga that I was like, okay, I need to take this to my people. And my people is healthcare workers. My people is you and the urology community and the surgeons. My story is after I felt better with the yoga, I decided that, hey, I need to train to become a certified yoga teacher. And very fortunately, an opportunity came where the yoga studio had weekend classes only. So you can become a certified yoga teacher. You come there on Friday night and Saturday, Sunday. You train for 200, 300 hours. It's a 1-year training. And then you become a certified yoga teacher.
I want to kind of get some of the details before we actually get to the studio. So you've had this internal sense, pandemic rolls around, you called it an epiphany. Like, was it like Wednesday night, you went to bed, Thursday you woke up and you said, you know what, I've got to do something different. And so you kind of explored, maybe I'll start running, maybe I'll start yoga, maybe I'll start, joining some type of community like Art of Living, which focuses on breathwork. Did anybody else, did your chairperson, did your kids, did your wife say, hey man, this is, a little bit different from what we've noticed once upon a time?
So as you said, Aditya, this is insidious. We keep pushing ourselves. We are kind of programmed to push ourselves. No one will push us more than we ourselves, right? It's like drilled into our brain that you can do it, you can do it, you can do it. So I think at some point it's self-critical, self-reflective, but it's very important you bring up a role of family. My wife, she was after me for months and months, like, what is going on with you? Look at you. You're not looking your usual self. You're changing. So I was very fortunate that I listened to her and I listened to my friends and said, okay, I'm going to start to do something. And I tried different things. And this one kind of, fit my style.
I think it's really insightful that, it may not be that the first thing that you dip a toe into sticks. And obviously, management of stress, burnout is a very personal thing. It's not like journaling or yoga or breath work or taking this, exercise, competitive sports is going to be a perfect fit for everybody. There's introverts, there's extroverts, there's physically minded people, there's more, there's all types of variations. And I think it's really useful for me and for the listenership to hear that you dabbled maybe or explored some things and then ultimately found something that seems to have worked for you or seems to be working for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually encourage that. Don't make just one thing as your main wellness activity. Try different things. And you can do a combination of different things. And it's okay. Whatever works for you. I think the important thing is It's, personalized wellness.
You decided that you wanted to explore yoga. I mean, is this, maybe some recommendations from colleagues, friends, somebody that's gone to a studio, Google something that looks like it's in close proximity? How does this work? Close to work, close to home?
No, it's a funny story. So as I was, the yoga studio is in a mall in San Antonio. So I was in that mall, like walking around, and I saw a sign. It said, "Get hot," and it was for hot yoga. I look at the sign. I'm like, okay, this is my chance to have a hot body. So I walk in and and I'm like, so what is this? This is yoga. I'm like, it says get hot. Yeah, your body will be very, fit if you do it. Like, okay, let me try. So I go to the class and she's like, okay, go in child pose. I go in child pose and she cranks up the heat to 104 degrees. And at that time, I realized, I'm like, okay, this is like really literally hot yoga. I had never done any of that stuff and I could not do the class, but I felt so good. I went back and I never left that studio.
I'm laughing, Dharam, at multiple levels. So I had the good fortune of doing the AUA Brazilian exchange program, and it was for about 3 weeks. And I was like, all right, I'm going to do something kind of for my health, a little bit outside of my typical. And I literally Googled yoga studios, and there was one about a half a mile away, and it was hot yoga. And, kind of as an acknowledged, non-flexible person, I go there. It was so humbling. I mean, these people that have been going to this studio doing incredible poses, and I'm like about to like stroke out, like as I'm spasming. But like you said, it was tough, and I would go home and I just felt so good. I'd wake up in the morning and like nothing was like stiff or felt funny. And I guess, I shared this because the point being is just like anything, it can be that easy, right? You just go check it out. Either resonates and it doesn't resonate. So when you walked in, you went in to explore, to get hot. Was the ability to become a teacher, any of that, like even like remotely on your radar? That seems like so overwhelming from the get-go.
Oh, no. I was like, whoa, what happened? What just happened? Why there's heat and humidity? They have 40% humidity. I'm like, what is she doing? And I was like, there were only 2 other people in the class. I'm like, oh, this is like super strange. I cannot breathe. I cannot hold my pose. I actually slept after, like, she put me in child pose and I slept. She had to wake me up. She's like, sir, the class is done. I'm like, can I sleep for a little bit longer?
All right. So you went in there and like many things, it was uncomfortable. It was foreign, but clearly something kind of struck a chord. And, maybe just kind of tell us a little bit of the rest of the story. So you've gone to a couple of classes and how you've been able to expand this and scale it up.
Yeah. So I started doing it, then 6 months, 8 months went by, and then I was like, whoa, this is really good for me. I'm reflecting on myself. I am very well aware of what's happening in my body, my physical body. And then in my mind, I can visualize what kind of thoughts I have in my mind based on just sitting and kind of meditating. And then I started thinking, what about people who don't know? Like healthcare workers are notorious for not taking care of their health. I mean, that's the fact. So I started thinking, what if I take this? Because they are more likely to listen to me. I'm one of them, compared to some random yoga teacher telling them, go in child pose, go in warrior one, or do this pose. So, and then I started thinking, what if I become a certified yoga teacher? So that's where I jumped at the opportunity. At that time, I didn't know it was a good idea. Actually, I had a lot of regrets for first few weeks while in the teacher training because I was taking away time from my family. Friday, 5 to 10 p.m., Saturday, 7 a.m., 7 p.m., same for Sunday. So I was taking a lot of time away from my family or not doing research or not writing papers, not writing grant in that time. So I felt tremendous amount of guilt, Aditya, that I'm just wasting my time. I'm sitting in this room with them and we are learning breath work and all this stuff. Why I'm wasting so much money and time on this? But then I was like, okay, you know what? I just paid a large amount of money for this course. I just have to finish it now.
That's tricky. I mean, I feel like, I don't want to pry too much in your family life, and I think it'd be fine with me sharing that you have a wife and children. So, when you're taking care of yourself, let's just call it, you're not spending time with them. And that I think is a push and pull that we all struggle with. And I would venture to say that maybe our female colleagues probably feel it a bit more, where there may always be this, balance between, am I diluting things at work? Am I diluting things at home? And it may lead to a constant sense of incompleteness in both venues. I mean, I'll take my morning routine is the coffee's been set the night before. It's brewing when I get up. In the shower, I brush. When I'm out, I drink my cup of coffee on the way to work. And from the moment my eyes open, I'm working within 25 to 30 minutes. And for a variety of reasons, I kind of decided I need to prioritize stretching mostly. And this was operative fatigue, physical fatigue. And I decided that in the mornings I would do literally like a 10-minute Peloton stretching class. And the guilt I felt for not starting on like goal-directed behavior. And mind you, again, this is like 10 minutes in the morning before anybody's on campus or awake, was, it took me weeks to get over that. And anything in the evening when my family's around is just like I don't know, it's like this anguish that's really, really challenging. Can you talk a little bit about that, prioritizing, carving out time, and how that also evolves?
That's an excellent topic, Aditya. I'm glad you're bringing this up. So you mentioned anguish. I felt the same way. That's why I had that guilt of taking, so many weekends away for 10 months and not seeing my kids. So for the teacher training, we had a family meeting. I was like, okay, what do you guys think? Should I do this or not? And my wife was like, you need to do this. First, for yourself, and second, for people who you love, which is, our community. And my daughter, at the time she was 10, I have 3 daughters. The youngest one, she's like, yeah, Dad, you need to follow your dream. Just like, this talk in Disney movies, you need to follow your dream. And she's like, yeah, I'll be okay. But I think if this is very important for you, you should do it. The other thing they all said was, I was much happier person when I started doing yoga. So the family actually has priority on quality of time we give them. And for me, it was in my head that I need to spend as much quantity of time, but it could be 20 minutes, but a full quality 20-minute is much better than, spending 2 hours and not paying attention to them. When I'm with them, I'm with them. I'm not with my phone, with my Merc. I'm with them. But I learned that in yoga.
Yeah, I certainly think that sometimes we feel good sacrificing, suffering. We think it benefits our families, our patients in some kind of weird, twisted way. But if you went and asked the people that you're trying to sacrifice for, they'd say, by all means, go do that. A, because you enjoy it, and B, as a secondary benefit, we think you're going to be much more pleasant and engaged and involved, present when you complete that. Yeah, I mean, for me, just to kind of complete that thought, it started out with 10 minutes a morning. And exercise has just been something that I love, but it's just tough for me to prioritize. I started biking to work, and, many times it's while like on a Zoom call or whatever, but I start my day with, 30, 40 minutes of self-care, which is a newer phenomenon for me, and it's been wonderful. So you obviously took like just the kind of hours and commitment you're describing, full Saturdays, full Sundays, Friday evenings. That's kind of one end of the spectrum. But could you maybe advise us something practical, prescriptive on somebody that just wants to start engaging in self-care, whatever that may be?
So self-care, I think you can start with having dedicated time. You commit to a time. You say, you know what, 20 minutes, 3 times in a week, I'm going to take out and I'm going to do something for myself. And that does not mean going out or doing grocery shopping or doing some kind of chores. That is your time, your date with yourself. You are giving that time, you are gifting that time to yourself. Just like when you invest in stocks, you have dividends, you get dividends. That time you have, 20 minutes, 3 times or 4 times in a week, that's the dividend you're giving yourself for working so hard. And I think we are very reluctant. We are very shy. We are programmed not to give that time. And that hurts us. Now that 20 minutes each day or every other day gives you time and opportunity to kind of like reflect on your body. Aditya, you are in the operating room doing post-chemo RPL&D. If you are lucky, you are done in 6 hours. Otherwise, usually 8 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours. If you're regrafting aorta or IVC, 12, 14 hours. That's a lot of stress on our physical body. It doesn't matter how much we think we are powerful, we are Superman, we are not. So musculoskeletal issue can creep up. You have chronic pain. If you talk to urologic oncologists, they will complain back pain, headaches, lower back pain, shoulder pain, hip pain, all kind of pain. So that 20 minutes you take for yourself, you will work on that physical body. And then maybe in that time, you can also work on the mind, the stress part, what's going on in your mind, what is important. And when I say work on the mind, it doesn't mean dwell on the past or like he said this or there was a bad case, what could I have done this? No. Or worry about the future. Oh, my grant is due, my paper is due, I have to give this talk or this talk. None of that matters at this time. What only thing which matters is being present in the present moment. So giving yourself that opportunity to be present in the moment helps reduce the mental stress. You might ask me, how can staying in present will give you an opportunity? Because you are taking control of your prefrontal cortex. When you reflect, when you introspect, you are taking control of your prefrontal cortex and you are lowering the amygdala hijack we have as healthcare workers. We are chronically stressed because we have given our midbrain, amygdala, control of our thoughts, emotions, how we react, how we think. And by taking that control back, you're giving yourself a break. And that's important for us to do.
That's really insightful. And, sometimes I think about life as one never-ending to-do list, whether that's the big to-dos, the small to-dos. And if you kind of run through that list ad nauseum in your mind, particularly if you don't have some set goals for chipping away at that list, there's almost a constant feeling of drowning because the list actually just seems to tend to grow and grow and grow. I don't think this is anything particularly novel coming from me. But I think what I'm hearing is when you're separating some time, and we'll talk about some of the practical implementations, but yoga, breathing, mental rest, these are all inextricably related. You at the very least get to disengage from this to-do list of things that are coming and things that have been. And that's
Correct.
Incredibly powerful.
So if you look at the neuroscience literature, what they talk about is people who are chronically stressed, burnout, suicidal, overworked, the physiology is the same. We are letting our midbrain take over the control. And slowly, we get used to the sympathetic overdrive, which is being driven by amygdala. So always in a rush, always chronically stressed. There is a critical period in that curve where our brain says that there will not be any more synaptic connections developing. Means we cannot develop new ideas, new innovative techniques if we don't relax. There's good neuroscience data on this. Okay, good thing about giving yourself 5 minutes is the body sends the signal back to our prefrontal cortex. Our interpretation, Aditya, of those signals, our brain's interpretation of those signals, that's called interoception. How our brain provides interoception can change our physical and mental stress. So brain will send the signals back to our body and say, communicate. There's a bidirectional communication. So I think that's why there's such an emphasis on mind-body connection, in neuroscience now.
Yeah, I absolutely appreciate that. And I mean, we're wired that way, I think. Clearly evolutionarily during points of stress, it kind of made sense for the sympathetics to kick in a big way and help you survive that event. And I'll share a story. This was within the last 4 weeks or so. I was doing a post-chemo RPLND, and it was a tough case where the plans were not favorable. And we had a small venotomy that wasn't trivial, and I had grasped it with the DeBakey, and everything was kind of controlled, etc. And instead of just doing stuff, which is my kind of typical response, we're going to get in a controlled situation. I did some box breathing for about 20 seconds. In 2, 3, 4, hold 2, 3, 4, out 2, 3, 4, repeat. And I was open with my team that I'm just going to take a few seconds and breathe. And then we did the planning. Let's just triple anesthesia. How are you doing? Do we have this? Do we have that? Etc. Just kind of planned. But I mean, it's obviously impossible for me to say how I would have responded without that 20 to 30 second pause versus after. But certainly I was not just kind of hearing that freaking out. I was able to calm myself intentionally and I think put together a logical plan better than if I haven't. So I think there's value in even this smallest little bit, 1 minute, 3 minute, 5 minute is better than nothing, I think.
So what you just did, Aditya, on that case, you did breath work because breath is a bridge which can connect our autonomic nervous system to our prefrontal cortex. So you use that bridge to calm your mind. And I think sometimes a lot of times we are in a situation where the situation is really bad, tense. We don't know which way the case is going to go. And sometimes we react out of proportion to what actually is going to happen. And I think having some kind of physiological framework where we can always go back and say, you know what, I'm going to take 5 breaths here, box breathing, and then we can re-evaluate the situation. I think yoga and mindfulness kind of talks about all these things, how to do. So it's a tool.
Yeah. So you mentioned react, and I think that's also just kind of how we generally respond to things by definition. But how about being proactive? Okay, before X, Y, and Z case, have you ever led, a 2-3 minute coordinated breathwork exercise that could help foster culture, teamwork, sense of purpose? Do you ever do that? Case specific, day specific?
So I've not done it with team. I play music, before case, put some nice music and we'd all listen to a song. But I practice on day of surgery. I get up and I do some yoga or some kind of workout, especially if I know it's going to be a long case and it's going to be a bad case. I do something kind of for my physical body.
Can you talk a little bit about, we're talking about breath work, and that may or may not be familiar to the audience. What does that mean? And maybe you could share like somewhat easily implementable option, again, 1 minute, 3 minute, 5 minute, depending on the context that people could actually take away from this.
So as I said, breath work is focusing on breath brings you to the present moment. And the example I give is, my teacher used to say, oh, just close your eyes and observe the breath going in through your nose and out. And then within 10 seconds, my mind will go somewhere else. It will be like gone. And then you try to re-pull your mind to the breath. And then 10 seconds gone again. So I think focusing on something tangible, practicing with something tangible gives me an opportunity to kind of bring my focus to being present. So if it's okay with you, I can do a breath work exercise. And I found actually you did the 4-box breathing. Most healthcare workers cannot do that. Because I teach classes, so I know they will do inhale and I ask them to pause and exhale. They cannot do the box breathing because that's lung capacity is not that much. So let's just do the 3-part breathing. It's called 3-part breathing. So sit in a relaxed position, shoulders a little bit back, neck is straight, hands on your thighs, palms facing down. And now close your eyes and take a deep breath in and hold. Slowly exhale. Breathe in for a count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Hold for 1, 2, 3. Exhale. 1, 2, 3. Inhale. 1, 2, 3. Hold. 1, 2, 3. Exhale. 1, 2, 3. Last one. Take a deep breath. Inhale. 1, 2, 3. Open your mouth wide and exhale everything out. Slowly open your eyes. How do you feel?
I feel good. I mean, I feel different, and I think I'd mentioned this to you as we were planning this podcast in the middle of the pandemic. My wife and I it was a Zoom retreat for a program called Art of Living, which is basically all about breath work. There was very little about yoga and stretching, but it's all about breath work. Goes into the, as children, how we breathe and how that kind of evolves, talks about, sympathetic and slow, shallow breathing versus calm, deeper, controlled breathing and all the benefits. And I mean, we did this 2-day retreat and it was incredible. It was absolutely incredible. I think the ask might have been a little bit too much for where I was in my life, to carve out 30 minutes every day. I tried it, but it was not sustainable. But I remember, feeling a pretty profound change in the way I felt and was thinking about things. And I mean, I don't know how long that was. It could have been longer than 30 seconds, but there's certainly a little bit of a different feeling, which I would call good. So I think that's something that the listenership could easily take away. A couple of minutes, or you're sitting at your computer and you're just feeling a little sleepy, just do that for a few minutes. Is that fair?
Yeah. Breath is again an anchor for connecting to your mind. Yoga, actually, when I teach yoga class, I put a lot of emphasis on breath work. I tell students that first objective is breath work. Second is sensations, observe your sensations. And third is physical posture. Because I think the way people think is physical posture, you have to be flexible, you have to be able to do handstand, this stand. None of that matters. Yoga Sutra, which was written 2000 years ago, is very clear on this. The whole purpose is to connect with your breath. If you can do that and you're sitting in your chair, you are practicing one of the 8 limbs of Ashtanga Yoga, connecting with your breath.
I think that's really cool and very empowering that it doesn't have to be, again, like some contortionist type pose to even have a seat at the table, that it could really just be, sitting there. And if you go from what I'll maybe describe as triangle breathing, is that what you called it, Dharam?
Yeah.
3-part breathing to box breathing, which is basically the same thing, but it's 4 seconds hold, 4 seconds hold, 4 seconds hold. That could be amazing. Now, yoga, obviously it's a huge term. It's an all-encompassing term, and there's hot yoga, Bikram yoga, any different type of iteration. But let's bring it back to like us. And I kind of was thinking about this like a smoker. It's hard to you should quit smoking. Well, why should I quit smoking? Because you have a less likelihood of dying and getting all these bad things in 20, 30 years. That's a bit of a abstract thing to grasp. And I think some of what you're describing is the short term, the here and the now, and then, the long game. But maybe just some common stuff that we do, robotic surgery. We're sitting in a certain position, and despite optimizing our ergonomics, there's going to be stress. What are some things that like a person could do to maybe help take care of their body before like a robotic case?
So stretching is critical. Robotic cases, most surgeons will complain of neck pain and upper back pain and hip pain. Part of it is just the ergonomics, paying attention to ergonomics. But again, to train yourself to do robotic case for 8, 10, 12 hours in the operating room, you have to practice some kind of physical activity to strengthen the back muscles. Because everything is forward in robotic, so we have to strengthen the back muscles. It's putting a lot of pressure on our upper third of trapezius, neck muscles here, and lower back, latissimus dorsi. So, when I was training to become a certified yoga teacher, I was looking at each pose, each posture from a viewpoint of a surgeon. How can I use this posture in robotic? How can I use this posture in open surgery? So when I'm teaching class to my people here, I have drilled down 50 poses, and we go through those 50 poses to specifically target those muscles. So hamstrings, glute, latissimus dorsi, trapezius, shoulder muscles, biceps, triceps. We cover all that in the class because I wanted to be very specific about wellness in what actually is tangible we are doing. So I think for listeners who don't do yoga, who do something else, focusing on those areas where we hurt the most and strengthening those areas is key. Stretching is key.
I can definitely appreciate that. And I actually went to a yoga class and the instructor told me that, well, sir, you're not really in a good position to start yoga. You need to start out with stretching, actually, so you can meaningfully participate in yoga. So I think it's nuanced, but it's different. And could you give some names of stretches or yoga poses, say, for instance, if somebody wants to look them up on the internet, or is there some sequences like Surya Namaskar or like, sunrise salutation that you're like, this is a good way that's going to cover, some high dollar real estate before a robotic case or an open case?
Yeah, I'll tell you that, but to just reply to your comment on teacher telling you that you're not good for yoga, I have students who are medical school, medical student to up to retired physician. Yoga is your journey. No one can actually tell you that you're not doing a correct pose. wherever you are in that pose is the right pose for you. So it's your journey. Only you can walk that journey. So anywhere you start is your yoga. So some poses listeners can do, especially surgeons, robotic surgeons, open surgeons. That would include Warrior 1 in yoga. That's called Veerbhadra Asana Ekam, Warrior 1. Warrior 2 is variation of Warrior 1. Warrior 2, Veerbhadra Asana Dve. Warrior 3, airplane pose, runner's lunge, cobra pose, locust pose, camel pose, reclining waterfall, Supta Baddha Konasana, that's reclining bound angle pose, cat and cow pose. All these poses would strengthen the back muscles, the spinal muscles, and the core muscles. And as slowly as you advance, you can start looking at more advanced poses.
One of the things that kind of occurred to me, and I was reinvigorated into stretching and yoga after we went on a family vacation, and I took the time to take advantage of some of the courses that were offered at the place that we were staying, and it became screamingly obvious I've got some work to do. But the learning curve is actually, I think, somewhat shallow, as long as you kind of are patient and gentle with yourself. The ROI is fast. I mean, it was 2 or 3 days of stretching where I could sense that I felt different after a case than I did, 2 weeks prior. And then when you do some of these poses, it just feels so good. And again, I think if this isn't a part of your upbringing or your daily routine, or even like a morning stretch, like literally yawning and stretching out, if that's not a part of your routine, when you just engage in it a little bit, you're like, oh man, that is a really good, positive, pleasant sensation. So, and I think, you listed off about 10 poses, and we're talking maybe if you spend 30 seconds per pose, that's 5 minutes before an OR day. And I'm sure there's the crossover for a clinic day where you could, start the day a little bit different.
Yeah, or in clinic. I do yoga all day, Aditya. So if I'm in clinic and the clinic running late or patient is not roomed and stuff, I'm like, okay, whatever. I'm just going to do a chair pose. And for a minute, I hold a chair pose. And then I do some other pose. I do it throughout the day because then I'm not wasting my energy in something which I don't have control.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. My brother-in-law brought this up to me about how unnatural it is, kind of from a human evolution standpoint, to sit in chairs. And of course, standing desks became kind of cool for the last several decades, but he was like, what's actually going to be really cool are sitting floor desks and little things. Like now when I play chess with my kids or read a book, instead of sitting on a chair or a sofa, I'll sit on the floor. And I might be, alternating my position to like tolerate it, but I've participated in stretching at least for those 20 minutes. Whereas if I was sitting on a chair, I'm just sitting on a chair like I always do. And I think these like minor ways to incorporate this really without dedicated time, that's not the message here, but at least to improve flexibility as singularly, it's pretty straightforward to incorporate during the course of the day.
Yeah, and it adds up. Like, even if you have like a clinic of 30 patients, 40 patients, and you have running, 10, 15 minutes behind, you can add up. You can get 30, 40 minutes of workout during your clinic if you are mindful of doing something.
So, your journey to like oversimplify where, something kind of clicked for you and your family and your colleagues that it was time to change something. You explored several things. Yoga seemed to resonate to the point where, in addition to taking care of yourself in a bigger way, you were interested in learning how to teach others in kind of a surgeon-specific format. And now, if I'm not mistaken, there's hundreds of people that you've been able to impact through your education. Is that right?
Yes. So I've been very fortunate that I can rent a studio. I rent a heated studio. I crank up the heat to 102, 101, 102 degrees. And I have been training. I do 1 or 2 classes in a month, and the classes are full. I've trained more than 500 healthcare workers, professionals in San Antonio. It has become really very meaningful for me to do this for our people.
Has sustaining it been challenging at all, or has that come pretty naturally now that it's basically a part of your life?
Yeah, no, I can, because I know 1 or 2 Sundays I'll do this, and people enjoy it. The classes are always full, so I feel good about continue to do this. I'm also doing a live stream now because some people who cannot make it, they're out of town, they request live stream. So I do live stream plus in studio class.
Yeah, I was going to ask if there's any online recorded sessions or opportunities. By all means, I think we could share that in the show notes for people that would be interested. I see very little downside to that. And I'm glad to hear it's sustainable. I mean, I think it's for a variety of reasons. I know you're in Houston now, but maybe with the next AUA, how cool would it be to organize something in your home studio, so to speak, to get together some folks that are interested, want to kind of break the seal and see what it's all about.
Of course, I'll love to do that.
Yeah, I mean, whether it's kind of officially sponsored by the AUA or not, I think it'd be a really, really cool thing. I mean, this has been awesome, Dharam, to hear about your journey. And it's been so, I think, positive for yourself, but also incredibly selfless to take out that time and work to teach other people in a way that's accessible, interpretable to us as surgeons. Any kind of parting thoughts as we come upon an hour here for the listenership?
I think one thing I've seen, we try to maintain sense of balance in today's uncertain environment. And it can be a struggle trying to appear outwardly calm and motivated when inside you feel like you are drained. It's very important for us to acknowledge that, and then act on that. Find time for yourself, maybe 10 minutes, 20 minutes, but that 20 minutes when you connect with yourself, and in that 20 minutes, you may connect with yourself for a minute where nothing else matters. That's important because that's where you are being present.
I love that. And I mean, maybe just to kind of piggyback a couple of thoughts from my end. One, just like so many things in life, it's never too late. Even if you're at whatever stage of your career and you've never kind of done this, there's no time like the present. And I think there's resources out there that really would love to help out with your physical, mental wellness. 2 is just kind of shedding that ego of, I've got to be so dedicated to whatever I'm doing, and I've got to suffer and I've got to sacrifice at my own expense. I mean, that took me a long time. I think a part of it was the generation that we trained in, kind of a little bit of the aura of oncology, maybe specifically to be like, I mean, did I envision myself like 10 years ago talking about like self-care? Like, no, I thought that was for like, a different type of person, but I might be late to the party, but I think, again, better late than never.
Yeah. And you're never late. It is what it is. We have to look at life as it is, as it unfolds. And if this is something new for your listeners, that self-care and well-being is important, then all you need is to figure out which tools can help you cultivate that well-being.
I love it. I think it can be quite that simple, but first thing it has to occur to you, hopefully sooner rather than later. And, again, hats off for what you've been able to do thus far, Dharam, and certainly looking forward to see what you continue to do in this extremely important arena.
Thank you, Aditya.
All right. Well, some breathing tips, some yoga poses to take back with you, some concrete prescriptive recommendations, and a lot for us to think about. Thank you, Dharam.
Thank you so much for having me on your show, Aditya. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for listening. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe, rate the podcast 5 stars, and share with a friend.
If you have any questions or comments, DM us at _BackTable on Instagram, LinkedIn, or Twitter.
BackTable is hosted by Aditya Bagrodia
and Jose Silva.
Our audio team is led by Kieran Gannon, with support from
Josh McWhirter, Aaron Bowles, Nick Shellcross,
and Ness Smith-Savadoff. Design and digital marketing led by Brian Schmitz, with support from
Devante Delbrun.
Social media and PR by Chi Ding.
Administrative support provided by Jamila Kennebrew.
Thanks again for listening, and see you next week.